Welcome, friends. Today, I want to share a story that speaks to something many of us will face in some form: the deep pain of loss and the slow, sacred process of emotional recovery. This is the story of Lydia Matthews, a woman who lost her husband unexpectedly and yet somehow found her way from despair to hope, from heartbreak to healing. But this story is not just about Lydia. It is about what happens when everything you love changes in an instant, and how faith, community, and time can begin to rebuild what grief once shattered. If you are walking through loss or know someone who is, my hope is that this story will remind you that healing does not mean forgetting. It means learning to live fully again with God's help. Lydia Matthews was married for 15 years when her husband died unexpectedly in a car accident. The loss left her devastated, numb, and consumed by grief. She remembers saying, "I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Every part of my life was tied to him, our home, our plans, our children, and suddenly it was gone. I did not know how to go on." For months, Lydia struggled with intense sadness, anger, and a sense of helplessness. She found it hard to sleep, to eat, to focus. Even prayer, something that once brought her comfort, felt hollow and distant. Her friends tried to help, her family surrounded her, but the depth of her grief made her feel completely alone. That is something many grieving people understand: the sense that the world is moving on while yours has completely stopped. Grief has a way of disorienting us. It changes how time feels. It changes how food tastes. It changes how we think and pray. And yet, in those spaces where words fail, God does not turn away. Scripture tells us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34:18. Sometimes that closeness does not feel like comfort at first. It feels like silence. But silence does not mean absence. God often sits with us in the ashes before He calls us out of them. If you are there right now, in that silent place, you are not broken beyond repair. You are being held, even if you do not feel it yet. Lydia's turning point came when her pastor encouraged her to bring her raw grief honestly before God. He reminded her that God mourns with her, that He is not offended by tears, questions, or even anger. So Lydia began journaling letters to God, not polished prayers, just honesty on paper. She started attending a widow's support group where she met other women who truly understood. And slowly, she began to allow herself to feel her emotions without judging them, trusting that God could handle her pain. That is such an important turning point when grief moves from suppression to expression. Many of us grow up believing we need to be strong or hold it together. But emotional recovery begins when we let ourselves be human. Crying is not weakness, it is release. Admitting our pain does not make us faithless. Instead, it opens the door for real healing. Psalm 62 verse 8 says, "Pour out your heart before Him. God is a refuge for us." That is exactly what Lydia did. She poured out her heart. And maybe that is what you need today: to stop editing your emotions and start entrusting them to God, because He cannot heal what we hide. Lydia's story reminds us that healing is not a straight line. There are good days and there are crushing days, and both are sacred. Every tear you shed is noticed. Every breath you take is part of your becoming. Over time, Lydia discovered that faith could coexist with grief. She learned that trusting God did not mean pretending she was okay. It meant believing that He was still with her even when she was not. She began volunteering at her church, raising her children with renewed purpose, and mentoring other widows who were newly grieving. She says, "I will never forget him, and my grief is still part of me. But God taught me that He can carry the weight I cannot bear alone." Emotional recovery is not forgetting the loss, it is learning to live fully again with God's help. That is such a powerful truth. Faith and grief can coexist. You can love God deeply and still hurt deeply. Those two things do not cancel each other out. In fact, the presence of pain often means your heart is still alive, still capable of love, still capable of compassion. Healing does not mean the memory fades, it means the memory no longer paralyzes you. And as Lydia's story shows, helping others can become one of the most profound steps of recovery. When you share your story, you transform your pain into purpose. Your scars become signposts of hope for someone else's journey. If you have experienced loss of a spouse, a parent, or a dream, know this: your story still has chapters left to be written. You may not feel strong, but you are still standing. And that, my friend, is strength. Today, Lydia leads support groups for widows, speaks about grief and faith, and writes about finding hope after loss. Her story is proof that even in the deepest sorrow, God is still weaving redemption. Maybe that is where you are still waiting for that thread of hope to show up in your own story. If so, hold on. The same God who met Lydia in her grief wants to meet you in yours. He does not promise to erase the pain, but he does promise to redeem it. So, let this be your reminder. Healing is not about moving on. It is about moving forward with love still in your heart and faith still in your hands. You are not forgotten. You are not alone, and your heart can live again. If this story encouraged you, share it with someone who might need a little hope today. And if you are walking through grief yourself, let me know in the comments. I would be honored to pray for you. Until next time, remember, even the broken pieces can become beautiful in God's hands.